The sound before the silence. He had trained for this signal his entire career, and had never once believed he would actually hear it. ISV Cashin, Antaresar System, Mission Day 8185. Captain R. Maddox, Active Mission File. The signal had a specific tone. Maddox had heard it exactly twice in his career, both times in training scenarios, both times in controlled environments with an instructor watching and a clear debrief scheduled for afterward. The ISV program used it sparingly precisely because its psychological effect was calibrated to produce immediate full wakefulness in any trained officer regardless of sleep depth, and that kind of physiological response, if triggered too often, stopped working. So they kept it rare. They kept it for the real thing. He was sitting up before he was fully conscious, reaching for the console before his eyes had finished adjusting, moving with the automatic competence of a body that had trained this sequence until it lived in muscle rather than mind. The display read, Priority Alpha ISV Command, respond immediately. He pressed Accept. Director Price's face on the screen. No preamble. Her expression had the quality of someone who had made peace with a situation by the simple mechanism of having no other options. Captain Maddox, the Antaresar system is under attack. We need the Cashin in that corridor now. He stared at the screen. His brain, which was 3 seconds behind his hands, caught up with what she had said. Under attack, he said. By Lathium vessels, Price said. Multiple. Our long-range relay picked up the engagement signature 40 minutes ago. Surface bombardment has been confirmed on Antara's secondary continent. All ISV communication channels to the system have gone dark. We have no contact with any asset in the system. The headache started then, a point of pressure behind his right eye that arrived without warning, precise and specific, like a finger pressing into the back of his skull. He noted it and set it aside. I don't, he started. Director, we were just 3, the Lathians. Captain, Price said, and her voice had the particular quality it got when she was being kind in the most efficient way she knew how. I need you moving, not understanding. Understanding comes after. Move now. Yes, he said. Understood, we're moving. Maddox, she paused. Be careful. The channel closed. He sat for 2 seconds in the dark of his quarters with the display's blue light on his face and the pressure behind his eye and the specific disorientation of a mind trying to reconcile 2 things that could not simultaneously be true. 3 had taken a sentinel's hit to keep him from getting hurt. 3 had sat in a cave with him and told him about Varthanol and incomplete models. 3 had submitted a revision request to the directive on behalf of the Antaresar moon. 3 had. He stood up, he put on his jacket, he went to the bridge. All stations, he said, coming through the bridge door. Battle stations, immediate transit to Antaresar system. Yara, fastest corridor route. Yara was already at navigation, her fingers moving across the display with the competence of someone who had been half awake and fully ready for several minutes. Fastest route puts us there in 6 hours, 14 minutes at maximum drive. Do it. Cap, Ham said, from the engineering console. He had the expression that he got when something was wrong in a category he didn't have a protocol for. What's happening? The Antaresar system is under attack, Maddox said. Lathium vessels. Surface bombardment confirmed. The bridge was very quiet for a moment. Ham said, 6 wouldn't. I know, Maddox said. 3 wouldn't. I know. Then something is wrong, Ham said. Something is wrong in a way we don't understand yet. Yes, Maddox said. Which is why we're going to go look at it. He moved to his console. Vas, I need you to relay our status to command. Tell them we're in transit. Tell them we'll transmit on arrival. Vas, already in position, nodded. He looked at Maddox with an expression that was not the face of a man writing a report. It was the face of a man who was frightened and was being professional about it, which Maddox found, in the moment, more reassuring than composure would have been. Maddox pulled up an encrypted channel, not the standard ISV relay, not the Lathium formal transmission protocol, but the personal channel that 3 had given him after the cave on XRC 9001. Unofficial, not on record. The kind of channel you gave someone when you were indicating that the official record was not where everything important was going to live. He typed 7 words. "We need to talk. What is going on?" He sent it. He watched the channel status for 30 seconds. No response. No read acknowledgement. The message sat in the relay with the stillness of something dropped into deep water. The headache pressed harder. He turned back to the bridge. 6 hours, he said. "Everyone get what sleep you can. I want full team awake and ready an hour before arrival." Nobody went to sleep. 6 hours and 11 minutes later, the Cashin dropped out of transit at the Antaresar system's outer boundary in Yara, said nothing for 4 seconds, which was how Maddox knew, before he looked at the display, that what they were entering was not a situation with easy categories. The system's debris field told the story first. Antaresar vessels, the small, short-range transit ships that the civilization used within their own system, scattered in the outer approach, some intact, some in pieces, the dispersal pattern of ships that had been moving fast when they were destroyed. The scans read residual energy signatures that were consistent with Lathian weapons discharge. Antara was visible at medium range. From this distance it looked, as it always had, beautiful, the swirling cloud cover, the blue-green of the oceans, the dark masses of its continents. But the cloud cover over the southern continent had changed. It had the brownish-gray quality that atmospheric particulate gave cloud systems when something on the surface had produced a great deal of heat and smoke over a short period of time. Ham, looking at the scan overlay, was completely silent. Ham was never completely silent. "Southern continent," Yara said. Her voice was flat in the way it got when she was managing what she was looking at by describing it technically. "Multiple impact sites. The energy signature is consistent with Lathian weight-class orbital bombardment. The secondary population center," she stopped. She looked at the scan. She continued. "The secondary population center is not reading on any of the civilian infrastructure signatures." "It's gone," Maddox said. "The infrastructure signatures are gone," Yara said. Maddox stood at the forward display and looked at Antara and did not say anything for a moment. The headache was a steady, low pressure now, the kind that you stopped registering as acute and started registering as present. A new baseline, something that was going to be there whether he noticed it or not. "The moon," he said. Yara pulled the scan. She looked at it for a moment. "Structural integrity readings are compromised. The extraction rate signatures are gone, no active operation. But there are," she paused. "There are 3 weight-class vessels in low orbit over the moon. Stationary, not extracting, present." "Watching," Sable said, from her station. "Or enforcing," Maddox said. He looked at the system, at the debris, at the brownish-gray cloud, at the 3 weight-class vessels watching over the moon. "Still no response on 3's channel," Yara said. "Nothing on any Lathian frequency," Voss confirmed. "Not the formal channels, not the relay network. Complete signal absence from all Lathian assets in the system." "They're not talking," Ham said, and his voice had a quality Maddox hadn't heard in it before, not anger. Something lower and more specific than anger. The register of a man who had trusted something and was in the process of accounting for what that meant. They did this, and they're not even." "Ham," Maddox said. 6 wouldn't," Ham said again, quieter this time. "I know 6. 6 drinks tea and argues about steeping time and—" "I know," Maddox said. "I know. And that's why we're going to be very careful about what we conclude until we have more information. But right now we need to." The proximity alarm activated. "Lathian squadron," Yara said, fast and precise. 3 Shear-class Keth-Vorath designation, approaching on intercept vector. They've got a weapons lock. Hail them, Maddox said. Hailing. Silence on the channel. The Shears continued their approach. Hailing again, Yara said. The Shears opened fire. The first hit took the Cassion's port shield array, and the upgrade from Earth Station Vance absorbed it, not without effort, the ship shuddering with the force of a Lathium fast-strike weapon at combat output, but absorbed it. The second hit came 6 seconds later from a different angle. The third followed the second before the hull had finished responding to it. They're not collecting data, Ham said, from the engineering console, his voice now entirely in the register of someone with a technical problem that needed solving. Those aren't ranging shots. They're going for systems. Evasive, Maddox said to Yara. Ham, I need everything the drive has. Already giving it, Ham said. What followed was 4 minutes that Maddox would not be able to reconstruct cleanly afterward. The specific blur of a combat situation where the cognitive load exceeded the brain's ability to timestamp individual events. He knew the Cassion's new weapon system discharged twice, that Yara moved them through the Shear's approach vectors with a kind of navigational precision that looked, from inside it, like controlled desperation, and that Ham did things to the drive output that were not in the technical specifications and probably wouldn't be included in any future technical specifications either. He knew that the fourth hit took the primary shield emitter offline. The fifth hit the communications array. The sixth hit something in the aft section that Ham described, over the intercom, with a single specific profanity that conveyed more technical information than any instrument reading. We're done, Yara said, not in defeat, in assessment. The quality she used when she had run the numbers, and the numbers were final. We've lost primary propulsion, shields are at 11%, the weapons system drew too much power on the second discharge, and we've got a cascade fault in the distribution network. We cannot fight or run. Escape pods, Maddox said. Cab. Now, he said. All crew, escape pods. Yara, set the Cassion's autopilot to move away from Antara, give us distance. Ham, you have 90 seconds to get to your pod. The ship. Is a ship, Maddox said. It can be repaired. Go. They went. Maddox was the last one off the bridge. He stopped at the communications console for 12 seconds, long enough to send one more message on 3's channel. Cassion down. Antara, if you're receiving, answer. And then he went. The escape pod sequence was automated and fast, and the planet came up through the pod's small viewport in the way that planets came up when you were falling toward them without a ship around you, larger than expected, faster than comfortable, real in a way that transit approaches never quite were. He didn't know where the others had landed. The pod's communication system was operational, but getting no response on any channel. The headache during the fight had faded. Now it came back. Antara's atmosphere caught the pod, and the entry heating turned the viewport white, and Maddox held onto the restraints and thought about 3's message sitting, unanswered, in a relay somewhere, and tried not to think about what that silence meant. He hit the ground in the dark. Somewhere in the northern continent, the pod's last coordinate before atmospheric disruption had put him over the interior highlands, which was either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on what the highlands contained, and which he couldn't assess from inside a crumpled escape pod in a field that smelled of turned earth and something acrid that he didn't want to identify. He ran a self-assessment, functional. The right shoulder had taken something during the combat maneuvers, a bruise, possibly a strain, nothing structural. The headache was there. He had his sidearm, his personal communications unit, his kit, and the 4-second head start that military training gave you over panic. He didn't use the communications unit immediately. If the Lathians were monitoring ISV frequencies, and they always were, transmitting was marking his position. He waited. He listened to the planet. The northern highlands were not quiet. In the distance, at a bearing he estimated as south-southeast, There was a quality to the air that wasn't sound exactly, but was the residual physical presence of something that had produced a lot of heat. The kind of atmospheric aftereffect that orbital bombardment left. He could smell it at this distance. The specific acrid note he'd registered on landing, now identifiable as the complex chemical smell of structures burning at temperatures that reduced them to their components. He had been on Antara before. He had walked the secondary city's plaza and watched the Antaresar move around the relay towers with their careful not-looking and their trained compliance. He had been in the trade hall where Verath had given him documentation that was 340 pages long and did not contain the word Lathium. He had walked the city in the early morning before the performance started and watched an old woman handle fruit with tenderness and two children chase something small and fast down an alley. He sat in the field and breathed and did not allow himself to follow that thought to its conclusion. They found him 40 minutes later, four of them, Antaresar, moving through the highland scrub with the specific economy of people who had learned to move without being seen over a long time. They didn't speak. One of them, young, the violet eyes wide with something that wasn't panic but was related to it, pointed at his ISV jacket. He took it off. He handed it over. They gave him a rough cloth covering that smelled of smoke and other people and gestured him to follow. He followed. The resistance tunnel network in the Northern Highlands was different from what he'd seen in Antara's secondary city. That facility had been maintained, organized, built over years of careful construction into the existing underground infrastructure. This was older and rawer, natural cave systems widened by hand tools and necessity, the walls marked with the specific improvisation of spaces that had been made functional in a hurry. The bioluminescent moss that the Antaresar had cultivated in patches along the walls gave just enough light to navigate by and not enough to see faces clearly, which Maddox suspected was not accidental. There were more people than he expected. 60, perhaps 70, in the main cavern, some standing, some seated against walls, some lying on bedrolls in the alcoves that had been carved into the rock. The sounds were the sounds of a situation in the hours after the worst of it. Quiet voices, the specific controlled quality of people managing pain, someone across the cavern murmuring something that might have been comfort or might have been instruction, and underneath all of it, the silence that filled the spaces where noise should have been. He saw the wounded. He didn't count them. He noted them and looked away because looking was the right thing and staring was not. He saw the corner where 3 bodies had been laid out with care, covered, their faces turned toward the cave ceiling, some personal object placed near each one by hands that had wanted to do something and hadn't had more to offer than that. The headache pressed. Ashar Vrel was in the cavern's inner chamber, bent over a map table that was a piece of equipment that had clearly been carried a long way and had the marks of it. She looked up when they brought Maddox in, and her face did something complicated, relief and calculation in a proportion that Maddox filed away, the way he filed things that he didn't have time to fully examine but needed to remember. "Captain Maddox," she said. "Ashar," he said. "You're hurt." "I'm functional," he said. "My crew, I came down in an escape pod. We were separated during the evacuation. Do you have any information on?" "We have people watching the Highland approaches," she said. "If any of your crew came down in this region, we'll find them. And the rest of the system, the ship. The Lathians are not responding to any communication from any source," she said. "The formal government, Verath's office, has been silent since the first strikes. The relay towers are still active, but they're not carrying any traffic we can intercept." Maddox sat down on the nearest available surface, which was a supply crate, and pressed 2 fingers against his right temple where the headache lived. "Tell me what happened," he said. "From the beginning, everything you know." Ashar looked at him for a moment. Then she sat down across from him and told him. The strikes had begun without warning 3 standard days ago, not in the middle of a negotiation, not following a specific trigger that anyone had identified. No ultimatum, no communication at all. Lathian orbital assets that had been present in the system for 23 years, quiet and administrative, had simply begun firing. The secondary city, the one Maddox had landed in, the one whose plaza he'd stood in, was the first target. The strikes were precise. Infrastructure. The relay towers that Antaresar had learned not to look at had been left standing, which she said, with a flatness that told him she had thought about what that meant and had not yet arrived at a conclusion she was willing to give words to. The resistance had been in the tunnels before the third strike. Their network had given them 20 minutes warning. Informants in the formal government structure who had seen the orbital positioning change and had done what they'd always had the sense to do, which was tell Shaz people before they told anyone else. 20 minutes, Maddox said. Not everyone made it in 20 minutes, she said. The three bodies in the outer cavern. He nodded once. He didn't say anything about it because there was nothing to say about it that would be more than words. My crew, he said again after a moment. I need to know there. We're looking, she said. He believed her. He also noted that she had moved past it quickly. The headache was consistent, not worsening, not improving. Present, like a second awareness, running under the first. Ashar gave him 2 hours. Food, rough, functional, the kind of meal prepared under conditions that didn't allow for anything more, and a sleeping space in one of the alcoves, and the specific resistance courtesy of not asking the questions she clearly wanted to ask for long enough that he had slept for 90 minutes before she came back. He had not slept well. The headache did not respect sleep schedules. She sat across from him in the alcove, with the bioluminescent light making her violet eyes look darker than usual, and she said, I need to know what you know about the Lathians. I know a lot of things, Maddox said. What specifically? Their fleet, she said. Their ship classes, weapon systems, response protocols. Their command structure, the directive, how it forms, how long it takes to form, what conditions are required. Their lattice hold locations in this system, their relay positions there. Ashar, he said. She stopped. I understand what you need this information for, he said. He kept his voice level and careful, the way he kept it when he was being honest about something uncomfortable. You're looking for weak points, targeting priorities, ways to fight back. Yes, she said, with no attempt to frame it differently. I can't give you that. The chamber was quiet. In the outer cavern, someone coughed. Someone else said something low, and Antaresar. Captain, Ashar said, and the word had edges. We have lost people. We have a city that is. She stopped. She breathed. We have 23 years of surviving inside this system, and we have resources that we have spent years building, and we have a moment, right now, in these hours, while the Lathians are still deciding what they're doing, where we might be able to act in a way that matters, and you have information that could. I know, he said. Then give it to me. I can't. Her expression moved through something and arrived at something else. You don't trust us. I don't know enough about what's happening, he said. I got woken up 6 hours ago by a priority signal telling me the Lathians were attacking you. I arrived to find devastation. I have had no contact from my crew since landing. I have had no contact from ISV command since losing the ship. I have had no contact from 3, he paused. The headache pressed. I have had no contact from my Lathian contact, who 2 weeks ago took a hit from a sentinel to keep me from being injured. None of this makes sense in the way things need to make sense before I hand over intelligence that could be used to take military action. What sense do you need it to make? Ashar said. There is a city above us with smoke coming from it. There are 3 of my people in the outer cavern who will not be going home. I know, Maddox said, and I'm not dismissing that. I am, he stopped. I need to hear from my crew. I need to hear from command. I need to understand what happened and why before I contribute to what happens next. That's not indifference. That's how I operate. Ashar looked at him for a long moment. You operated by going into an underground facility on Solen and removing a Lathian prisoner, she said. That was different. How? That was one person in a cell, he said. What you're asking me for could be used against many. She stood up. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read in the bioluminescent light, and he had learned to read Antaresar expressions reasonably well. It had the quality of a conclusion being reached, not warmly. I'll check on the search for your crew, she said. She left. The next several hours had a grinding, circular quality that Maddox associated with situations where the important things were happening somewhere else, and he was in the wrong place for them. He was given access to the outer cavern, to the Resistance's basic facilities, to conversations with the people around him, Antaresar, who had been underground for 3 days now, who were managing fear and grief, and the specific practical demands of survival with the discipline of people who had been practicing exactly this for 23 years. He talked to them. He listened. He helped where he could. He had field medicine training, and one of the wounded needed a dressing changed, and the person doing it was doing it correctly but slowly, and Maddox's hands knew the motions, and the man on the bedroll looked at him with his violet eyes and said something that the translation matrix rendered as, "You have done this before." "A few times," Maddox said. The man said, "Good." Maddox changed the dressing. The headache sat behind his eye, and he noted it for the 4th time and set it aside again. There was no word on his crew. The Resistance's Highland Watchers had found no sign of the other escape pods in their coverage area, which meant either the pods had come down outside the range, or they hadn't come down in the northern continent at all, or he stopped following that thought. There was no response on 3's channel. The message he'd sent from the Cashin's communications console before evacuating sat in the relay, unread or unacknowledged, and he didn't know which. Ashar came back in the evening, in what passed for evening in a cave system, which was a collective decision to dim the bioluminescent panels and begin the social rituals of rest. She sat across from him again with the same quality as before but amplified. She had been thinking. She had not, he suspected, arrived at a more patient position. "Your crew," she said. "We have found nothing." "Thank you for looking," he said. "I need you to understand," she said, "that we are not a rescue service. We are a resistance movement with fewer people than we had yesterday and with a situation that is developing faster than our ability to respond to it. The resources I am allocating to looking for your crew are resources that could be allocated elsewhere." He looked at her. "Is that a trade?" "I'm describing a reality," she said. "Ashar," he kept his voice even. "What you are describing is a trade. You want me to give you intelligence about Lathian military infrastructure, and in return you will continue looking for my crew. I want you to say that directly." A pause, long enough to be its own answer. "People are dying," she said. "I don't have the luxury of being direct when being direct costs time." "Then I'll be direct for you," he said. "No, I'm not going to trade tactical intelligence for a search effort. Not because I don't care about my crew. I care about them more than I care about most things. But because that's not a trade I can make in good conscience without understanding what that intelligence will be used for and how." Ashar stood. She was very still in the way she got when stillness was a choice rather than a habit. "You came into this system," she said, "as a guest. You have sat at our table. You know what this planet has cost us." "I know," he said. "And you still won't." "Not like this," he said. "Not as a transaction, not before I know what I'm actually helping." She looked at him for a moment that held more information than anything said aloud. Then she turned to the 2 resistance members who had been standing near the chamber entrance and said something in Antaresar that the Matrix caught the edge of. The word it rendered was not a word Maddox had heard her use before in this context. The 2 members moved toward him. Maddox had the training for this. He also had the physics of it. There were 2 of them. The space was small, and he was a man who had been awake for the better part of 20 hours with a persistent headache and a bruised shoulder. He made a reasonable accounting of himself. It wasn't enough. The first hit was across his left shoulder, the bruised one, which was either intentional or unlucky, and he didn't have the angle to tell which. He went sideways. The second hit was to the back of his head, which introduced a new layer of sensation to the headache's existing architecture, and the third was somewhere in the ribs, and he stopped keeping track at that point because keeping track was taking resources he needed for other things. They put him in a cell. He knew it was a cell because it was small, and the door had a lock, and there was nothing in it except the rock walls and himself. He sat against the wall. He pressed his hand against the back of his head where the new pain lived on top of the old headache. He breathed. Somewhere above him, through meters of rock and highland earth, Antara was still burning. Somewhere in this system, his crew was somewhere. Somewhere 3's message sat unanswered, in a channel that was either being monitored or ignored, or had no one left to read it. The headache pressed, steady and specific, behind his eye. He was confused in the specific way of a man who had trained his whole life to understand things clearly and had arrived somewhere that clarity hadn't prepared him for. The kind of confusion that didn't come from missing information, but from having information that pointed in directions that couldn't all simultaneously be correct. He sat in the dark. He waited. Fragment personal log, no timestamp, Antaresar system surface, location unknown. Head hurts more than it did, ribs too now. I've been trying to work out how you get from the cave on XRC9001 to this. From 3 taking a hit to keep me functional to 3 Lathian shear-class vessels opening fire on the Cashin without a word. I can't build a bridge between those two things that makes internal sense. I keep trying, and the middle of the bridge is missing. Something is wrong in a way. I don't have the pieces to describe yet. The headache started when Price called. Right then, within seconds of the signal waking me up, I've been setting it aside because there's always something more urgent than a headache. But it's been there for how long now? Hours. Since before the fight. Since before the landing. Since the moment I was told the Lathians were attacking. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means anything. I know that Ashav Vrel looked at me with relief and calculation in a proportion that I filed away. I know that she moved past my crew very quickly. I know that the question she asked me was very specific: ship classes, weapon systems, response protocols, lattice hold locations. Very specific. The kind of specific that comes from knowing exactly what you need. I know that 3 bodies in a cave is a real thing, and a city burning is a real thing, and none of that is a lie. I know that real things can be used by people with purposes I don't fully understand yet. I'm going to stop trying to work out what I don't know yet and focus on what I do know. I'm alive. The cell is basic but functional. They want something from me, which means they have a reason to keep me intact until they get it or decide they won't. I need to hear from my crew. I need to hear from command. I need to hear from 3. Until I hear from one of those 3 things, I am staying exactly where I am in terms of what I give anyone. Head hurts.